A lovely Thursday morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us on another edition of Public Square. Here we discuss topical issues from the standpoint of the people. And today we'll be looking at yet another topic that definitely affects the nation as a whole. And as usual, I have one of my studio guests is already in the studios as we speak. We're hoping to have the two other guests join us in the course of the program. Dr. Olugbenga Faseluka, who is a former permanent secretary and head of service in Ekiti State, right here in the studio. Thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, today we'll be looking at the many challenges, the woes and glories of the Nigerian civil service. Of course, they say that the civil service happens to be the engine room of the nation's economy, and once it goes wrong with the civil service, it definitely goes wrong with the with the face of the national economy. And so today we'll be looking at some of the challenges, some of the glories as well, the past and present, specifically of the Nigerian civil service. My name is Olabisi, Olaniyi, Oluwasegun, and we'll go on a short break. We're back to kickstart the discussion. Welcome back. Let me quickly inform you that we'll also be opening the port for you today to air your views and opinions on the focus of discussion on the program today. First of all, the civil service is definitely an institution that houses more than 100,000 Nigerians, and of course it is comprised of a lot of different people from different facets of life. Majorly, those who are career workers form the larger percentage of the civil service in Nigeria. But it is believed that this particular institution has been riddled with a lot of vices, social vices, corruption topping the list. And of course, we would like to lay bare some of the facts regarding this particular assertion in the Nigerian space. First, let's begin with how the Civil Service Commission has been faring before the advent of democracy in Nigeria. That's during the military era, and as we speak. You are a man who has been in the system for a long time. You understand the workings of the civil service. How would you put side by side the operation of the civil service as we speak today and the way it was before now?
Well, I would like to give a background to the civil service itself. You have correctly described it as an institution. The civil service is a major institution of the executive arm of government, the other one being the government itself, that supports the government in a governance. It's you also called it the engine room. So if we get that clear, then it is apposite to start by saying there's the difference between the civil service and the public service, because people sort of confuse the civil service with the public service.
Okay.
The public service is larger than the civil service because it transcends the other arms of government, the legislature, the judiciary. They all belong to the public service, but the civil service is restricted to the executive arm of government, and that is what you refer to as the engine room of government. Having said that, again, it is important to give an historical background to the civil service. By 1912, the Nigerian Civil Service Union had been formed. The import of this is that the Nigerian Civil Service had existed as far back as then. And you will recall that one of the major contentions that led to the nationalist struggle in Nigeria was that Nigerians were not being allowed to occupy desired and deserved positions in the civil service. So, the Nigerian civil service was older than most of the institutions that we have today. Our first political party, the Nigerian National Democratic Party, NNDP, was formed in 1922. So the Civil Service Union was 10 years ahead of the first political party. Other institutions, such as the armed forces as we have them today, did not come on board the Nigerian armed forces until after our independence. By 1954, the Nigerian Civil Service Commission, which was called the Public Service Commission then, had come on board. What am I driving at? Is the historical importance of the civil service institution and its the age. It has come a very, very long way, older than most of the institutions that we have as at today. So I need to put this background into perspective so that as we progress in the discussion, I might have cause to refer to
them. Okay. That said, you already made it clear that the civil service has been around for a long time, and governments at different levels, both at the state level and at the federal level, have been in charge of running the civil service, funding and running the civil service, particularly as it concerns the welfare of workers in that institution. Now, I asked you the other time that a lot of people have issues with the productivity level of civil servants, so to speak, now, because we seem to be narrowing down our discussion to the civil service in Nigeria, which, of course, has been one of the major contending issues in the public space. Now, I want to ask you, you have a knowledge of this institution, and you already reeled out some of the historical background of the civil service in Nigeria. Now, let's now compare. You served in the civil service for a lot of years, and you understand the workings, how it was, how it is, and the intricacy, the pros and cons of the institution. Would you like to put side by side the running of the civil service, as it were, in, let's just say, in the democratic era and pre-democracy? How would you compare both?
Thank you.
Especially when it comes to structure.
Okay, the structure of the civil service. We have agreed that the civil service is an institution. So within an institution, you will have structures. You asked me to compare how it worked under the pre-democratic era, that is talking about the military, and the democratic era itself. I started by saying the civil service itself was older than the military in Nigeria. It became our lot, it became the lot of the civil service to be subordinated to the military as a result of the coup in the 60s, particularly 1966. So the military provided the political leadership at that level, having toppled the democratic order then. So the civil service had to be subordinated to them. Essentially, two principal functions that the civil service perform. Number one is to advise
the executive,
the government, in policy conception, policy formulation, policy implementation.
Okay.
The second major function that the civil service performs is to implement those policy decisions when the political class now decides on the policy direction. So the Nigerian civil service, having served under a properly constituted democratic order when Nigeria got independence, let me say again, I mentioned the nationalist struggle, and I told you that this Nigerian Civil Service Union was formed in 1912. So it had been part of the nationalist struggle. So the Nigerian civil service, to my mind, was used to a democratic order when independence eventually came. And
as a tool to an end.
Yes, as also a major stakeholder, a principal partner in the process that led to independence itself.
Okay.
And after independence came, to now work with a democratic order. The military coup, January 1966, July 1966, altered all those. It altered all those because the democratic order, whether at the center or in the various regions, as at that time, the civil service was a principal partner. It was a major stakeholder. So it took a different turn when a military government came. So, to start with, a unification decree, number 34 of 1966, was signed into law by the military, which removed the basic powers of the regions. It transferred it to the central.
Which still operates till today.
Which in some other, in a way. Now, the civil service was used to a democratic arrangement. So, the essence of that was that the developments that Nigeria witnessed in the various regions and later states was as a result of the synergy, the cooperation, the understanding, the participation between the civil service and the government.
Okay, now that participation, the participation you're referring to, the synergy between the executive and between government and the civil service that you talked about, does that still exist today?
It doesn't.
Let that form the basis of our comparison first.
There was a mutual respect between the political class and the civil service before the military came. We keep, in the West here, we keep referring to the synergy between Chief Obafemi Awolowo and the head of service, Simeon Adebo. Then, there was mutual respect. The head of government, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, was a man of caliber in his own right. Knowledgeable, exposed, and there was a political ideology, sort of. There was a policy direction. The head of service, Chief Simeon Adebo, was in the same light. The education was there, well-educated person, the exposure was there, the knowledge was there. All those changed when the military came, until we now got to the unfortunate incidents of the 1975 mass purge in the civil service, where the best minds, the well-trained minds were sent home. And that was the dividing line.
Okay, before we move ahead, let me introduce my second guest in the studio. Thank you for joining us on the program, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you just heard the voice of Pastor Oyekan Arije, who happens to be a former labor leader in Ondo State. It's good to have you join us, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, before your arrival, Dr. Faseluka was trying to give us a historical background to the civil service in Nigeria, which of course helps to form some sort of basis for the discussion this morning. I'm sure he has, if I give him the floor, he wants to be lecturing the public about the civil service, but we have other issues at hand, pressing issues that affect the civil service at hand. You, as a former labor leader, would you give us some sort of comparison? Thank you. Thank God you're not just knowledgeable, vast, and experienced in that institution. You're also of age. Tell us, what the comparison would be between the civil service of today and what we used to have in those days.
Thank you very much. As said by the former Ekiti State Head of Service, the civil service in Nigeria is older than the political class. As he said earlier, the Civil Service Union was formed in 1912. The civil service have been there pre-colonial era and during the colonial era and during the civilian era. I mean, in
democratic
era. At that time, as he said, it was not a master-servant relationship between the permanent secretary and the minister.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, their salaries were almost at par, unlike what obtains now. And at that time, the civil service was a real career position. As a matter of fact, it was said in those days that if you engage in any other business outside the civil service, it was regarded as divided loyalty, which could even land you into trouble. But as time passed by, the politicians, to a large extent, corrupted the civil service.
Now, talking about corruption, you said in your analysis that before now, the civil service, the salary of career workers, that's civil servants and politicians, were almost at par, meaning that they were not really far from each other. Mm-hmm. Now, would this account for the grand corruption that we have in the civil service today? It is not far-fetched. We have issues that we can allude to when we talk about corruption. Remember the incident that involved the former HOS of the nation, Winifred Oyekan, where it was said that she stole billions of naira from the coffers of government. Would you think that the drop in welfareism package for civil servant is because of probably because the payment has been dropped?
You see, in yesteryears, at the time Nigeria was growing, every civil servant, for instance, was entitled to free medical treatment for the civil servant and his spouse and children. Free medical treatment. And the hospital fees law, which still exists, has not removed that dispensation. But tell me, today, in all the civil services of the Federation, no civil servant enjoys free medical treatment. And in those days, the remuneration was almost sufficient for you.
You're talking about the salary?
Yes, was sufficient for you to keep life and soul together. But today, you can hardly say so. We are talking of minimum wage today. What is the minimum wage today? 30,000 naira, and not more than 6 states in the Federation had implemented it up till now. And they are even now saying that they want to remove wages from the exclusive list to the concurrent list, so that the state governments could pay whatever they want for their public servants.
Well, all of these things that we've been trying to expatiate, are they responsible for the level of corruption in the civil service?
That certainly is a very major factor. It's a very major factor. If your take home, if your pay can take you home, you are likely to be satisfied. But where your take home pay cannot take you home, you are not. I mean, you have to live. Your children have to eat. Your children will go to school.
Okay. You heard what Baba said. All of these things, the drop in remuneration, drop in welfare packages and all of that. Are there enough justification for the level of corruption in the civil service today?
When you talk about level of corruption, I'm part of the school of thought that have not agreed that there is that measure of corruption in the civil service.
Okay.
The former speaker, Dimeji Bankole, started all this when he accused the civil service of corruption, and he was challenged by the then head of service to expatiate on what he meant by putting corruption to the civil service. He was no longer forthcoming. The former head of service that you mentioned,
that's just one out of many.
Yes.
We have the issue of MENA also.
Yes,
if you remember.
Okay, I will speak about that.
Okay.
The former head of service, Mrs. Oyueta, that matter is in court. The money that was involved was about 304 million naira and 14 million naira or thereabouts. Until we hear from the court, let us presume, like the law will ask us to do, that the accused is presumed innocent until the court proves otherwise.
As against the 3 million naira that you said, about 3 billion naira was said to have been stolen during our time as HOS of the country.
I'm just saying that here. The minor matter, there is no organization without the bad eggs. And when you take a very close look on the minor matter, Rashid Minor was an assistant director who was made chairman pension tax reform team. The civil service, like we agreed, has structures.
Okay.
Minor, the pension task force presidential team was not working within the civil service arrangement as we know it. A structure has hierarchy. It is the civil service operates with from the top through the middle level below the line. That presidential task force on pension reform was not subjected to the civil service arrangement. It was a case of using an assistant director
to siphon public money.
At that level, a lot is involved in that assignment.
When we talk about
the civil service cannot be held responsible
for that. Let's even assume that you're right there. But remember that corruption is relative. When we talk about corruption, it doesn't necessarily have to mean financial mismanagement.
Good.
In the civil service, it has been alleged that there are different forms of leakages by which civil servants allegedly siphon government money, such as the input of fake names that is popularly called ghost workers syndrome in the civil service. There is this issue of people collecting money for trainings and trips, foreign trips, without going for such trainings and pocketing the money for their personal gains. Are these not other forms of corruption?
Yes. You see, when they talk about corruption, we tend to narrow it to funds. And like you rightly said, we have our problems in the civil service, no doubt.
Okay.
I'm just talking about measure. The kind of what is put in the media, we don't go away. We are not near that at all.
It's been exaggerated.
It's exaggerated.
Okay.
Thank you for that word. Corruption, for instance, as to time. The resumption time in the civil service is 8 o'clock. When you come later than 8 o'clock, you are corrupt. Because you are stealing government time. You are also in the office, like Baba Arije said, you are not allowed to combine any paying job with your civil service calling. You leave the office by 10 o'clock to go and transact some other businesses.
Personal businesses.
So you are corrupt as far as time of government, which government is paying for. So I will agree to that. We have we have that within the civil service organization.
Okay.
But for the large-scale fraud, I say that the civil service cannot be stigmatized for that. And today, the head of service, the permanent secretary, these are positions that are alter egos of the civil service. What is their approval authority? In the state, particularly where I was head of service, I cannot approve expenditure. So where does the corruption come from? Where does it come from? So when we are talking about corruption and the civil service, we must put issues in their proper perspectives.
As a permanent secretary, you cannot sign funds or approve funds in your office, but definitely these papers go through your table, and sometimes money could exchange hands for certain things to be fast-tracked.
No. When politics came, the present-day political class inherited what I told you, the centralized government from what the military did. And mind you, by 1992, the military banned a class of our political leaders from political participation. There emerged what they could call new breed. This new breed is what you have now. They inherited the arrogance of the military. They inherited the high-handedness of the military, such that the civil service is sort of alienated from use and exercise of authority and power. So these are the perspectives.
Okay, Dr. Faseluka has been able to tell us what he feels about corruption in the civil service. Do you quite agree with him?
To an extent, I agree with him. But basically, the greatest perpetrators of corruption in the public service, I would not say civil service, in the public service today, is the political class. Because the head of the department today is the commissioner. In the past, the permanent secretary was the accounting officer. And when the permanent secretary was the accounting officer, he would defend public finance to the last drop of his blood. But the moment Babangida brought the civil service reforms in 1987, that was when the madness started. Commissioners will tell you that I am the accounting officer. I remember when I was the chief accountant in the Ministry of Health, a commissioner said to me, he said, "Accountant, please raise vouchers and draw checks in favor of the unlisted pharmaceutical companies who are to supply drugs to our medical stores at Ekiti."
And if you had not done that, it could have cost you your job.
I did not do it. I stood my ground. I immediately back to him. I drew his attention to the tenders procedure, and he had to withdraw and eventually asked them to convene the department tenders board meeting. At that meeting, all those whom he wanted to give the job to, they all lost out. And mark you, this situation earned me 9 postings in 8 months.
Wow.
During the time of Bode George. So if you put down your feet, sometimes when I blame civil servants is that many of the civil servants don't have the courage to challenge the political class.
That was why I had to come in when you were narrating that ordeal, that if a lot of people are in that situation in the civil service today, where the politician who has been made to oversee the workings of a particular ministry passes or hands down an order, you fail to do that, and it costs you your job. We have a lot of people who fall in that situation. What would you say to this?
We agree that the civil service is an institution It is structured. Then in addition to that, the civil service runs on rules and regulations. You have the civil service rules, you have the financial instructions, now you have the Public Procurement Act. These are rules that govern every aspect of the running of the civil service. The permanent secretary is the custodian of these standards of engagement, the rule books. He's supposed to be the accounting officer. That is, these are the structures, the arrangement for the runnings of the civil service. But what do we have? What do we have? I told you, in the First Republic, the service was used to a democratic order. After the military usurped all those, and the political class, as you have it today, that took over from the military, the new breed, inherited the maximum power of the military, such that it is difficult now for permanent secretaries to insist on certain practices and procedures in the service. The political class will want you to close the book, if you can, such that when you are drawing attention to the rule books, there is a job to be awarded, for instance, you say there is a Procurement Act. These are the provisions of the Procurement Act, and so on. My experience, either as permanent secretary or as head of service, is that the political class are not too patient with the bureaucracy. They tell you all this your bureaucratic thing. We are here for 4 years. We have a mandate to deliver. Some of them will even go to the extent to tell you that I'm not here to listen to rule books. What I am supposed to make within these 4 years, I will crush any officer, I will crush any arrangement.
They want to impede that.
So, these are the issues.
Now, we've been able to identify some of the problems in the civil service. We're still on it anyway. But, Pastor Arije, a lot of people believe that the personnel in the civil service today, and most of them are not competent enough, and that is affecting the productivity level of the civil service. Remember, we said at the beginning of the show that the civil service happens to be the engine room of the economy. It runs the economy. When we have incompetent hands running that institution, it definitely affects the overall face of the nation's economy. Do you think that government of today is doing enough to ensure that the workers in the system are given adequate capacity training to get better on the job?
In the first place, a civil servant probably who joined the service on level 8, a university graduate, by the time he comes in, he's still new. In the yesteryears, before you even sit down on your table in the office, you have to go for induction course, which will introduce you to the civil service and the public service. And there was inbuilt periodic in-service trainings to groom you for greater positions, higher positions. But today, if you look at the budget of government departments, as a matter of fact, the vote for training has been centralized today. As a result, departments who should determine what trainings the officers will attend to enhance their productivity, they don't even have a say. And people may now have to lobby before they can even go for an in-service training.
Now, talking about lobbying, the lobbying
it is part of the corruption.
The lobbying that we so much talk about, that Baba has emphasized there, do you think that if you lobby to get a slot for training and you eventually do well by attending such training to get better on the job, I think that it could be justified a bit if indeed you went for the job, you end up going for the training and translating it to better performance on the job. But one of the issues raised is that in the civil service, after lobbying to get a slot for training, you end up getting the money for the training and you do not even go for such training.
That is not peculiar to civil servants. It's even more rampant with the political class.
So it's across board.
It's across board. Even you see, when we talk, if we want to talk on what has corrupted the system, everyone is guilty, including you, because you voted in people on sentiments, not minding the quality of the man you are voting for.
I voted my conscience.
You will be 1%. People who vote their conscience will be 1% in Nigeria today. It's what is the vote today. As a result of that, the system is so bad that the politician has been made to spend so much before he gets to office.
And they have to recoup.
And by the time he gets in, he wants to recoup and to amortize for the next election. So he hasn't time for administrative necessities, for policies and so on. He wants to make it quick, and in doing that, he will jump so many rules. And before you know it, the system is going down gradually. It is not because of inexperience. Sometimes people who are experienced sometimes even exploit their better knowledge to bamboozle
for personal gains.
Yes.
Okay, now, is it possible, Dr. Faseluka, to have a Nigerian civil service, isolated from the political class? Is that, we've been talking about reforming the civil service for a long time. It's been long-standing. I remember the Oransai report and all of that. What do you think can be done to have a civil service that is devoid of any sort of influence from the political class?
We inherited the British standard civil service, the Westminster, the Whitehall. The principles upon which the civil service run, you have number 1, security of tenure, number 2, political neutrality, number 3, political impartiality, then number 4, anonymity. For any civil service to really run, these principles must be meticulously adhered to. Derogation from them will give you the kind of civil service you are talking about. Let's start with security of tenure. Once you enter the service, you are expected to spend 35 years length of service or 60 years of age, whichever is earlier. What do you find today? What do you find today? It is the contrary. There is panic in the Nigerian civil service because you don't know what tomorrow holds. Since that 1975 mass purge by the military. So, like I told you, the present political class inherited what the military did, and that has been a major bane on the civil service. You spoke about capacity. It starts with even the intake, recruitment into the service.
Like rightly said.
By the civil service standard, the Civil Service Commission is expected to recruit officers from level 7 and above. The commission had delegated the power of recruitment of the junior officers 6 and below to the various departments. The political class comes today, they talk about mass recruitment. Mass recruitment. In the process of mass recruitment, the prerequisites as prescribed by the public service rules are being compromised largely. If you are coming in as a clerical officer, for instance, the civil service rule prescribe what you must have. In the process of mass recruitment, it doesn't happen. Again, I became head of service before I knew that there were permanent secretaries who did not make second class lower. You have permanent secretary with pass, with third class. Meanwhile, mode of recruitment of graduates in the service as prescribed by regulation stipulates that even in the advertisements you must have a minimum of second class lower. So how did they come into the service? It's about compromise. It's about abridgment of procedures. So once the capacity is faulty at the point of entry, what do you do in career progression? So we have that problem there.
Okay, I'm still on the question of whether or not it is possible to have a civil service that is isolated from the political class. And I'll be asking that question from Mr. Toyin Akintuotu.
Dr. Toyin.
Doctor, for the purpose, I'm a journalist. Titles are really not respected in journalism. So for the purpose of the game, I think we must fine you for coming too late on the program.
I think we'll discuss that later.
Later. The people should know that you came late, Mr. Akintuotu.
Well,
and you should apologize.
For unavoidable circumstances.
Okay. So now we were discussing about the civil service before your arrival. Do you think it's possible to have a civil service that does not have the influence of the political class, so we could have some level of sanity in the system?
Of course, I think it is possible. It's unfortunate that in the Nigerian society, the Nigerian system is getting impossible because the public service itself, the civil service, has gradually been integrated into the political system or politicking, and this is not too good for the system. The rules are there. The civil service is a creation of status, the law, the constitution. If these statutes are followed, the constitution is obeyed, of course, this civil service will be insulated from politics. But how do you get this? That has become impossible. And that is why I want to say, even when I was in service at the various fora of heads of service, that the moment you politicize the appointment to the higher echelon of the civil service, then you are making the service political. And this is what is happening in many parts of Nigeria. Many heads of service openly declare for political parties. They join them in campaigns. They carry political identities, and this is not too good. But if you can insulate, and that was what was happening early in Nigeria, in those days of Simon Adaba, in those days of Augustus Adaba in the whole Western region, civil servants are seen as completely out of politics. But today I can tell you that's not the situation.
That's not the situation. Okay, now, because of our time, we have a lot of issues to talk about, but time is not really on our side. Let's quickly brush through the welfareism of civil servants, which, of course, we've been able to touch on briefly. But let's, base this next line of discussion on the welfare packages given to Nigerian civil servants. Mr. Akintuotu, because you're joining us now, do you think that government at all levels, both at the state level or the federal level, are doing enough to ensure that the welfareism of workers are prioritized? I understand that we have a new minimum wage, even though some states cannot pay that yet, but what do you think government should do to ensure that their welfare packages are improved upon so that they can have a better performance or better productivity level in the process of carrying out their duties?
Yeah. That will lead me to another question. Are the welfare packages of the other segments of the society, outside the civil service, are they better than that of the civil service? The situation in Nigeria is such that we cannot insulate the civil service alone. There's a general economic downturn, a lot of problems in politics and economics. And the civil service is a subsystem of the total system of the society. So I would say that what affects the civil service affects all in Nigeria.
It is believed, Dr. Faseluka, that the government should be responsible for the welfare of civil servants. Would you totally agree with him when he said that we shouldn't blame government for not doing as expected, from not performing as expected in the area of workers' welfareism?
Well, there had been observed disparity between what is paid in the private sector vis-a-vis what is paid to the public servants. The public servants has not been enjoying a reasonable pay vis-a-vis that. There were attempts to harmonize what is paid in both sectors. It has not worked out well. A permanent secretary at the state level, the salary of a permanent secretary is comparable to the salary of a menial worker in the oil industry, for instance, in the telecommunication industry. So,
and they are all public servants, civil servants.
Those have explained this disparity between the civil service and the public service when we started. Yes, in a way. If you are working in the NNPC, for instance, that's a national parastatal, that's a parastatal under government. So there's a need to review what is paid in the public sector to make this, because of the very crucial roles, the teachers that teach in school, health givers that operate the hospitals, they must be comfortable to be able to discharge this, the very rudiments of the public service itself. There must be commensurate pay to make public servants deliver well. That is my position.
Okay, still on the issue of salary, Mr. Arije, there's this disparity in how salaries are paid to civil servants, to public workers in Nigeria. They call some special salary scale. For instance, doctors, they have a very special salary scale that does not, fall within the ambits of. Okay, so what exactly do you think? Do you think it's even fair to start with, to have such operation?
Well, if you, as far as I'm concerned, Yoruba man will say, "Amukun ẹrù ẹ̀wọ̀, oní òkèlè ẹ̀wọ̀ ẹ̀wọ̀ sàlẹ̀." the system has been bastardized. You know, I said earlier that the minister or the commissioner has about the same salary as a permanent secretary.
Before now.
In the good days of the public service in Nigeria. For instance, one Dr. Soyode Franklin was the highest paid civil servant, public servant in Nigeria during his time. When the head of service was on 3,000 pounds per annum, he was on 3,180 pounds. He was earning more than the minister, he was earning more than the head of service. Today, if you look at the pay structure, especially of the political class, can you tell me today, even those of you in the broadcasting institution, what is the take-home pay of a senator? What is the take-home pay of a member of the House of Reps? The Revenue Mobilization Allocation of Fiscal Commission that is supposed to pattern remunerations in this country did package the remunerations, but the political class opted out of it and fashioned what they felt was good for them for themselves. And they will tell you that ability to pay. The Fiscal Commission fixes the salaries for the political class. The governor in Ondo State is supposed to earn the same as the governor in Lagos State, whereas the messenger in Lagos State may earn more than the one in Ondo State. Whereas Section 17.3E of Nigerian Constitution says there must be equal pay for equal work without discrimination on account of sex or any other ground whatsoever.
In other words, it is not fair.
It is not fair.
Okay. Now, another issue that is very recent is the proposed removal of the minimum wage from exclusive list to concurrent list, which would further damage the already damaged salary structure across board. Do you, Mr. Akintuotu, as somebody who...
I said about to be called Doctor.
Okay, Dr. Akintuotu. I know it takes a lot to actually earn that title, so let's give you that privilege on the show.
Thank you.
Dr. Akintuotu, do you think that government has made, well, it's still a proposal anyway, do you think it is even something that should be thought at all, that should be proposed at all, to remove minimum wage from exclusive list to concurrent list?
Well, I think it is. We must look at the nature of Nigerian society. The urban metropolitan states and some suburban areas. And honestly, if you are looking at it from realistic point of view, if you are a civil servant in Lagos and you are in grade level 10 or even a permanent secretary, the cost of living is far higher than that of your contemporaries in Ondo State. And if you look at it from that perspective, it could be argued that, well, why do Ondo State have to pay what Lagos is paying? And you look at the sources of revenue. The primary school teacher in the village, maybe he's paying about, or he or she is paying about 500 naira, 1,000 naira.
It's quite unfortunate that we have to end the discussion right here because of our time.
Okay.
I'm really sorry that I had to cut in, but I want to thank you, gentlemen, very, very kindly. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Dr. Faseluka, he is a former head of service and permanent secretary who served in Ekiti State. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Pastor Arije Oyekan, also a former retired Labour leader. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
I've not retired.
From service, of course, you have.
From people, I'm still active.
Once a comrade, always a comrade.
I
Okay.
consultancy for labor.
Okay, so I also want to thank Dr. Akintuotu Toyin for coming. He is a former HOS in Ondo State. Thank you very much for coming, even though you came late.
Sorry for that.
My name is Olabisi, Olaniyi, Oluwasegun. All has been said, and we do hope that government does everything possible to ensure that the civil service in Nigeria is repositioned for better productivity. Until next week, Thursday, when we'll be back, God bless Nigeria.
Before you know, commotion does start. Big trouble, big argument. Big fight,
Number one radio. Adaba FM. 88.9.